Before we begin discussing how to set up Eclipse Automatic Number Conversion, let's see the program in action. But we'll slow down the process so we can see how Eclipse Number Conversion works. And keep in mind that unlike some CAD systems, Eclipse Number Conversion works the same way in both real-time and non-real-time translation. So this is truly reporter-compatible software. Whether you're a real-time reporter or not, and whatever your writing theory, Eclipse lets you write numbers as you hear them spoken and applies your number transcription rules precisely. He drove about 3 miles about 3 days ago at approximately 3 p.m. to buy wood for a 3-foot fence for his 3 dogs. Notice that the same stenostroke was used each time I said 3. 3 is defined in my steno dictionary, but it's in there all by itself. It's not globaled with the word miles, or with PM, or even foot. However, miles and foot are units of measure that imply a specific number conversion. PM implies a time conversion. Let's continue. You may, one day in May, say that by May 1, you will find 100.
I don't know why it's showing the same thing.
Before we begin discussing how to set up Eclipse Automatic Number Conversion, let's see the program in action. But we'll slow. Before we begin discussing how to set up Eclipse Automatic Number Conversion, let's see the program in action. But we'll slow down the process so we can see how Eclipse Number Conversion works. And keep in mind that unlike some CAD systems, Eclipse Number Conversion works the same way in both real-time and non-real-time translation. So this is truly reporter-compatible software. If Eclipse only supported one style of number writing, it wouldn't be very useful. So let me give you an example of 4 very different steno styles so that you can see that this is truly reporter-compatible software. 11,104,031.04. So this reporter used a combination of number bar entries and word entries and wrote 100 when that's how it was spoken. I defined this as a conflict in the dictionary and wrote the word and whenever it was heard. Since the reporter writes and as a part of a number, the box next to process and as a number is checked.
Y'all remember we went through this?
Yeah. Yes, and mine is not marked, and I kind of want it marked, because if you say something and 35 cents, what would it put there? It would put a
And
point. It says process and as a number.
yeah, you want it as part of the number.
Right, so you'd want it, and would mean point, the decimal point.
No.
Yeah, because right now it's not doing it point. Okay, anyway, go ahead, I'll work on it.
And does not mean the decimal point. Okay?
Okay.
And is just going to convert it to whatever it's going to say. Because if it says $1,001,000, it's not going to put $1,000,000.1. Okay? It's going to put $1,000,001. So it's gonna know, okay?
So do you recommend us checking it off?
Yeah, probably. You know, if you write what you hear, which that's kind of what we're taught to do, is write what you hear, then you probably need to check that. But if you know that they're talking about money, or you know that they're talking about some kind of unit of measurement or something like that, then if you know what they're talking about, and you know that it's not part of the number, then you're going to be okay. Okay? Does that make sense?
Yes, it came out correct when I checked it. I checked it off, and then I put in the word and it gave me the decimal where I needed
Weird, huh?
it.
When you use it properly, it's weird how well it works. Crazy.
Crazy how that works.
Crazy.
So ignore written numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Mine's checked off on that. It's checked. Do I leave it like that, or do you recommend I take it off?
Well, I mean, it all depends on how you write. I mean, you know, and it'll kind of go into detail a little bit more, but it all depends on how you write, because if you write all your letters, all your numbers out, then yeah, you may need to check it. You know, because it's ignore written numbers.
Right.
So it's going to put everything into numbers.
Written
When it's a
down.
number, it's going to be just a number,
See, it came out.
not a word. Okay? Yeah.
Okay.
So
Check it.
anyway, that's what I was telling you about where you come in here. You can change the templates on, you know, different stuff, quantities, ordinals, stuff like that, extra ordinal formatting, and they'll kind of go through it or whatever. You can change your time. It's going to kind of show you how to do that. But this is where you go into, it's your user settings, numbers. Okay?
Since the reporter writes a mixture of word numbers and number bar entries, we have not checked ignore written numbers. I'll explain
Did you get that? Okay.
Yes.
And they're going to explain it further, but
Okay.
that more in detail later. And we've set that the system should write out the numbers between 1 and 10, but 11 and above will be in digits. This next example reflects my own number writing style, which has been optimized to take advantage of Eclipse. 11,104,031.04. For numbers between 1 and 10, I use word strokes defined as written out numbers because I want the number written out. Otherwise, I use number bar entries. If I tuck an E into a steno stroke, it's because that number is to be doubled, so 1E would be 11.
you have to be careful what you're hearing right here, guys. Okay? Now, if you write like this, then you don't want to use my little information that I gave you about the ordinals. Okay? So if you took, I don't know whose theory that is, whether it's Mark's,
I think it was Kissling.
somebody else.
Jamie's mom does that too, but she was telling us with the E.
Okay, well, if it's Jamie's mom's theory,
Hey,
whoever's
then we know
theory
it's
it
right.
is,
That's the gospel. Jamie's
yeah,
mom.
yeah, then she may know the preacher back there too. But you don't want to do that, where it turns the numbers around. So if you write the way that he does it, if you write 1E, it means 11. If you write 13E, it means 31. Mine means ordinals. So you have to be careful with what they're saying and what I'm telling you.
Could you put it, just hypothetically speaking, could you put an O for ordinal and achieve the same thing if you wanted to do that E thing for?
You really can't, because O is a number. Okay, so if you use the number bar with O, good question. You can't use it with A. You could probably use it with U.
That might
You know,
be
you
why they
might
did it
work.
that way.
But I don't know, how it's if it's going to conflict with something else in a different number. You'll kind of have to mess with it a little bit. Y'all didn't bring y'all's machines, did you? No?
I
Good.
have mine.
I think Jamie's mom uses, for example, 321. She'll stroke out 23U /1. Oh wait, I was wrong. It's okay. EU to switch the numbers.
EU.
But you have a double, like 33, not 3/3 with 2 strokes, but 3U to signify 3 2 times. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
You like-
No, it does not.
Well, she uses the U, the E and the U.
Okay. You don't talk anymore the rest of the
Okay.
class. No, I mean, everything's gonna be different, guys. Whatever is easiest for you guys, if you learned it from somebody else, if you have a mentor and they gave you some advice on how to do it, you like it, use it. Don't conflict with something else. Don't try to conflict with using ordinals and, oh yeah, I'm gonna use that thing where he switches it around with E2. No, you're not. And it's really gonna mess up your dictionary, okay? So be real careful how you define things, okay, in your main dictionary. And you wanna be conflict free, pretty much. So you wanna use different things for everything. Does that make sense? You know, you don't wanna use the 1E for ordinals and 1E for switching to 2. That's what I'm talking about, okay?
Or reverse. I don't have the box checked next to process and as a number because I don't write the word and when it's spoken as part of a number.
That's what I was talking about earlier. If you're brilliant enough to be able to hear a number without the and, then you don't want that checked, okay? But if you're taught to write it the way that it's said, then you want it checked, okay? That make sense?
So like if somebody says 123 and you write that, you want that checked. If
You
they
want
say
that checked.
123, you don't want.
It's not gonna matter.
Or if
It's-
they say the and anyways, but you don't write the and, then you
Yeah.
don't want it checked.
Yeah. If they say 123, which is a good example, 123, and you write 1 hun, H-U-N, and 23, then you want that checked. If you hear 1, 2, 3, then you don't want that. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter here, okay? It's gonna put it together, the 1, 2, 3. Unless you're doing it 1 hun, 23, it'll still put it together. It'll still put it together. 123, it's gonna know to put it together. And if not, then it's gonna give it to you in the Auto Magic keys. It's gonna give it to you whenever the numbers are together and there's units of measurement or stuff like that, like dollars, cents, any of that stuff, and numbers come after that, then it's gonna know that maybe it needed to go with it, okay? Even if you do put and, don't put and, but it's 1 hun, 2, 3, then it's gonna know to put it together. And even if you don't put it together, or you hear the 1 and you do, both the number bars and you hear 1 hun, 20, and it's 120, and you write 1 H-U-N and then 20 T-W-E-N-T, then it's still gonna know to put it together. Because it's gonna know that 20 is a number with hun also. Does that make sense? Guess we lost it. Y'all all right? Got it? Slick? You good? Perfect.
But I do have ignore written numbers checked because I will use a word number when I want one. So I don't want the system to write out any values for me. I will use word strokes when they are appropriate.
This is the way that I was kind of taught how to write. is ignore written numbers. You know, when I think that something needs to be written out, I write it out. And when I think that it needs to be numbers, I use the number bar. That's what it's telling you right there. Okay? Does that make sense? But if you're not, and all you hear is numbers, because that, everybody doesn't think alike, guys. And when it's going at 225, 240, 250, sometimes all you hear is what you hear. And you have a split second to react to that. So maybe you do hear, I needed 3 feet of lumber for 3 dogs to build a 3-foot fence. Are you going to know how to do that? Does it matter? Are you going to write out 3 every time? Are you going to hit the number 3 every time? You kind of have to know what you're going to do in that situation to know what you're going to do here and how it's going to react. That's why you have to know that. Okay? So you kind of almost have to put yourself in that situation. Well, if they're saying it, how am I going to do it? How would I do that? So when they're giving examples right here, you need to be thinking, how would I do that? Write it down on a piece of paper if you don't have your computer and not in your user settings already. Okay? So you need to write it down as to, how would I stroke that out? Would I write 3 feet, T-H-R-E-E feet, for a 3-foot fence for 3 dogs for $3? How am I going to write that out? Okay? Do you understand what I'm telling you?
Yeah.
Almighty. Looks like y'all just have like blank looks. I just want to make sure that I'm getting my point across and that I'm explaining it correctly. I know what I want to say. I just don't know if I'm explaining it correctly.
Well,
Okay.
it just depends, once we get into it and we work on it more and more, we're going to see what this says back to us, and we're going to adjust it to go along with how we're writing and what we want it to say back to us, right? So that's right. Look at him.
You don't speak in both of y'all.
Let's go outside
Sit.
Okay, bye.
There.
We're
I don't
going to eat
even-
pizza.
and watch the game.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm telling you to do it right now. When they're giving you examples, you think, how would I stroke that out? How do I think that I would hear that? Or when I hear a number every time, do I use the number bar every time? Do I stroke it out every time? Because I learned Mark Kissingberry's, where I think he writes his numbers out, all of them. Does he use the number bar? I have no idea. I have no idea about that cat. So that's what I'm saying. I'm giving you an example. Or what's her name's mom? If what's her name's mom tells you, Jamie's mom tells you, write everything in numbers.
Well, I have 3 dogs. I put the number 3 and it changed it to the words 3 because I told it to write words up to the number 10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what that does right here. Writing out numbers, and it's going to give you examples. 1 through 10, 10 through 20, 20 through 30, 40, whatever. No values, stuff like that. So it's going to give you different options. And it's going to explain to you a little bit more in detail about what those mean and what these mean. At the start, of a sentence, it's going to explain, stuff like that. And I was always taught at the beginning of a sentence, you never write out a word. You never write out a number. But just like you've known or should have learned already in the English language, no rule is obsolete. None. So if they're talking about a date, I put the date. But that's bigger than 100. Okay? So it's going to know to put it there as a date because I use it as bigger than 100. Okay? So it all depends on what you want to do with it, the person you go to work for, how they want it done, and she may want it written out. He or she, whoever owns a firm, may want it written out. You know what? When they say 2014, that's the way that I want it done at the beginning of the sentence. Because I was always taught that you never put a number at the beginning of a sentence. That's not how I completely learned. But I was always taught that smaller numbers, you know, when they're talking about child's age, stuff like that, anything that starts with a lower number other than like a date or a time. Time is kind of the same way. Well, what time did you go? 9:30. Well, you could put 9/30. It doesn't look as clean to me as 9:30. Do you understand what I'm saying? Once again, it's higher than 100, but they know that it's using time. So you're going to have certain strokes that you use, and we'll go into that in the advanced class of how you use certain strokes for time, you know, stuff like that. It really goes into detail in the next class, but this is how you do it. So I want you guys to put yourself in a situation when they're talking about it of how you think you would do it. Write it down on a piece of paper, because you need to go through and change these settings as to the way that you write. If not, then you're just kind of wasting your time. But whatever. All right? Did I get that?
Yes.
This third example is that of a reporter who's done a fair amount of work on computer-compatible theory. So, for instance, this reporter writes million with the stroke ML. But when million is said in the middle of a number, the reporter uses MLG and had that defined as a comma surrounded by delete strokes. Although it would be possible to use these entries with Eclipse, it's also possible to simply define these as the words million, billion, and thousand. So here's our same number: 11,104,031.04. So this reporter could continue to use these strokes that are habitual, million with the G.
Do you understand what it's telling you there?
Yes.
It just gives you different ways of writing. You know, if you write it differently, it doesn't really matter how you write it. You don't have to write it exactly the way that he does it. You need to define it the same way that he does in Eclipse, because Eclipse knows what to do with it, is what he's telling you. So it doesn't matter whether you use MLG, THOUG, because it's in the middle of a number already, where they're talking about 11,104,000. You know, it doesn't really matter. You know, he's telling you that the reporter here puts the G because it's in the middle of a number already. Who cares? Doesn't matter. Eclipse already knows to change it, so you're still going to define it like that. So it doesn't really matter that it's in the middle of a sentence. So if you want to write it two different ways because you hear it differently, then that's fine. You hear it differently because it's in the middle of a sentence and you write it that way. Or if they're saying $4,031 and you hear it, well, that's at the beginning, it's 4,000, it's only THOU, whatever, you know, but you still define it the same way, okay?
Or thousand with the G. They would just be defined differently in Eclipse to take maximum advantage of the automatic number conversion. As for the user settings, they'll probably be the same as the second example that I gave you. Our last example is that of a reporter who has been doing the computer's work. So this reporter would write the dollar stroke before the number, and it was defined as the dollar symbol with a delete space symbol. For the internal commas, the reporter had it defined as delete space, comma, delete space. And the same thing for the decimal point stroke. It was defined as a period surrounded by delete space symbols. In fact, these same definitions would work for Eclipse. So this reporter could write according to habit. $11,104,031.04.
Wait, how did he do this?
So whether your number writing style makes In fact, these same definitions would work for Eclipse. So this reporter could write according to habit. $11,104,031.04.
You see what they're doing there? A little bit ridiculous, okay? You can do it if you want, it doesn't really matter, okay? You want to do it the hard way, do it that way. Knock yourself out. When you get carpal tunnel in about 4 years after you're out, let me know how that worked out for you. Smarter, not harder,
Not harder.
okay? But if you want to do it this way, that's how you do it.
Is that somebody who does it like that? Maybe somebody who's been reporting long before?
And it could have been,
Was
it could have been, yeah, it could have been when they were doing it on clay tablets. Who knows? I don't know. But I learned it differently also. I mean, and I, you know, like I told you guys, I've been out 22 years. So I learned it differently also. I learned the other way. I had to teach myself this way. You guys are lucky enough that you're learning it this way.
How would you write it?
On this one, 11 mil, 1 hun, 4, and 31 D for dollars, and 4 S for cents. Here's the way that I would write it. That's probably how they're gonna say it. That's how I'm gonna write it. 11 MIL, 11 mil, 1 HUN, 4 million. What is that?
Zero. I'm like, where are you?
Thousand.
1,000.
104,000. 31 D for dollars. And I define my final D, which, you know, you kind of have to be careful how you define it, okay? When I define it with numbers, you know, it's the bracket, number sign, M, close bracket.
'Cause if
So it
not-
knows when it's with a number, it's gonna change it. It's not gonna put an ED on there. So it's not gonna
Yeah,
be
that's what it-
31 ED.
That's what I did. So you have to, you put yours in this.
Yeah, you
The
have to,
little brackety deals, number sign, M for money.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
that's interesting.
So that's how I would do it,
I like it.
okay?